Okay, next is multiplying real numbers. Now, the product of two numbers with the same sign is a positive number. So if you're multiplying two negative numbers together or two positive numbers together, the answer is going to be positive. For example, if you multiply negative 75 times negative 3, your answer is going to be 225. You still multiply 75 times 3 just like you always have. And since they have the same signs and you're multiplying, it's going to be a positive answer. Okay, the product of two numbers with different signs is a negative number. So when you're multiplying two numbers that have different signs, the answer is almost always negative. It doesn't matter which one's positive and which one's negative. It doesn't matter about the higher number. Because if they're different, the answer is negative. For example, if you have negative 6 times 4, that's just going to equal to negative 24 because the signs are different. If you multiply 12 times negative 9, that's going to equal to negative 108 because the signs are different. So let's do some examples. If we multiply negative 8 times negative 9, the signs are the same, so it's going to be a positive answer. So it's 72. Negative 4 times 2, since the signs are different, it's going to give you a negative answer, so it's going to be negative 8. Okay, here we're going to just do 2 together at a time. If you do negative 2 times 4, the signs are different, so that's going to give you negative 8. And then you can take this and multiply by your other negative 8. So now you have the same signs, so it's going to give you a positive 64 for the answer. And another thing that you can remember on that one, anytime you have the 2, 4, or 6, an even number of negative signs, the answer is always going to be positive. So anytime you're multiplying several numbers together, if there's an even number of negative signs, the answer is going to be positive. If there's an odd number of negative signs, the answer is going to be negative. Okay, this one we have to make sure we follow our order of operations. So let's do our multiplication first. Negative 3 times negative 9 is 27. Minus 4 times negative 4 is negative 16. And then we have to do our subtraction. Now remember, we have to rewrite subtraction as addition, so this is going to be 27 plus a positive 16, because you always change the sign of the minus sign and change the sign of the number behind it. Then go by your addition rules. And since they have the same sign, we're going to add them together. Let's see. It's going to be 43. And you keep the common sign, which is a positive sign, so the answer is 43. Okay, on this one, since your signs are different, your answer is going to be negative. Now remember, when you're multiplying fractions, you can cross out. But there's nothing that'll cross out here because the only number that'll go into 5 and 4 is 1, and the only number that goes into 6 and 1 is 1. So we can't cancel anything out. So just multiply the top together and you get 5. Multiply the denominators together and you get 24. So it's negative 5 over 24. Okay, 0 as a factor. If b is a real number, then b times 0 equals 0, and also 0 times b equals 0. So in other words, any number times 0 is 0. So if you multiply negative 6 times 0, that's just going to equal to 0. If you multiply 0 times 125, that's just going to equal to 0. And 0 doesn't have a sign. It's just 0. Okay, if you're evaluating exponents. All right, if you have negative 3 to the third power, that means you're multiplying negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3. And when you multiply those together, you're going to get negative 27. And you can see that if you were to do them 2 at a time, negative 3 times negative 3 would be 9. 9 times negative 3 would give you negative 27. And you can also notice if you have an odd exponent, it's going to give you a negative answer. Okay, negative 2 to the fourth power, that means you're multiplying negative 2 times itself 4 times. And so you have an even exponent here, so it's going to be a positive answer. And you could multiply just 2 together at a time if you wanted to. Negative 2 times negative 2 is 4, times negative 2 is 8, or times negative 2 is negative 8, sorry. And then negative 8 times negative 2 would be 16. Okay, so let's multiply this one together. Now, since I have an odd exponent, I know it's going to be a negative answer. And 2 to the third, 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8. So it's going to equal to negative 8. Okay, on this one, since I have an even exponent, I know it's going to be a positive answer. And 4 times 4 is 16. Okay, now be careful on this kind. This one is different than the one right above it. This one is just 4 to the second power, not negative 4 to the second power. So this one is going to be negative 16. So if it's not in the parentheses and there's a negative sign in front of it, no matter what the exponent is, it's always going to be negative. If it's in parentheses, though, if the negative number is in parentheses and raised to a power, if it has an even exponent, it's positive. If it has an odd exponent, it's negative. Okay, the quotient rule of two real numbers. The product or quotient of two numbers with the same sign is a positive number. The product or quotient of two numbers with different signs is a negative number. So when you're dividing, it's the same rules as multiplication. It says find the quotient of 36 divided by negative 12. Okay, the signs are different, so and it means the same thing. It could be written either way, 36 over negative 12 or 36 divided by negative 12. Both of those mean the same thing, so it doesn't matter which way you write division, either as a fraction or with a division symbol. So this is going to give you a negative answer, and 12 will go into 36 3 times. So the answer is negative 3. Okay, so let's work these out. Negative 12 divided by 4 is going to be negative 3. It's negative because the signs are different, and 4 goes into 12 3 times. Negative 80 divided by negative 10 is going to be 8. Positive because the signs are the same, and 80 divided by 10 is 8. 50 divided by negative 2 is going to be negative 25. Now you still have to remember your rules for fractions here. Remember that if you're dividing fractions, you change it to multiplication and you flip the second fraction. So this is equal to negative 2/7 times negative 5 over 1. Now, since the signs are the same, we know we're going to get a positive answer. And since we're multiplying, we can cancel out if there was anything to cancel out. But the only number that divides evenly into 2 and 1 is just 1. And the only number that divides evenly into 7 and 5 is just 1. So nothing will cancel out. Okay? And multiply your numerators together, and that gives you 10. Multiply your denominators together, and that gives you 7. So the answer is just 10 over 7. Okay, 0 as a divisor or a dividend. The quotient of any non-zero real number and 0 is undefined. So you cannot divide by 0. If 0 is on the bottom, if you're dividing a number by 0, it's always going to be undefined. The quotient of 0 in any real number except 0 is 0. So if you're dividing 0 by a number, if 0 is in the numerator, then it equals 0. You just can't divide by 0. So negative 6 divided by 0, this one is going to be undefined because you cannot divide by 0. So this one, 5 divided by 0, that's going to be undefined because you cannot divide a number by 0. And the other one, do your multiplication on top first. 0 times negative 2 is 0. And then 0 divided by any number is 0. So the answer to the second one is 0. Okay, now we want to evaluate the expression. We're going to have to use our order of operations here and also remember our rules for our sign numbers. Okay. The first thing you do would be evaluate the exponent in the parentheses. You know, you do your parentheses first, and then when you're working inside the parentheses, you can see that you'd have to take care of that exponent first, following your order of operations. Okay, then finish off the parentheses, work what's inside the parentheses. Okay, and then you evaluate the exponent. 3 to the 4th power right here, 3 to the 4th power equals 81. And now add, 4 plus 81 is 85. And then subtract, and 85 minus 3 is 82. So just follow your order of operations. Okay, let's look at this. Okay, we'll just work the numerator and denominator at first, just like they're two separate problems. So let's follow our order of operations in the numerator. You know you're going to do negative 2 to the third power first because you have to do your exponents first. Now, negative 2 to the third power is going to give you a negative answer because a negative to an odd power is negative, and 2 to the third equals 8. Okay, in the denominator, when you're adding with unlike signs, you subtract and take the sign of the higher number. So that's going to give you negative 3 in the denominator. Okay, do your multiplication. 5 times negative 8 would be negative 40 plus 52 over negative 3. Now your signs are different here, so you're going to subtract, and that would give you 12, and it'd be positive 12 because you go with the sign of the higher number. And then do your division. 12 divided by negative 3 is negative 4. So the answer is negative 4.